Hi, I'll be honest with you, this is a first for me, so any feedback will be appreciated. Today's musings of mine will regard oppression, a term much abused in this day and age, and I've got some thoughts to share with you. I'll start with the premise. The idea of oppression comes from a simple notion, which is deprivation. Somebody enjoying a thing and making it impossible to enjoy by another. Or to get slightly broader on this, a situation where an individual or a group becomes overpowered and incapacitated in doing or saying something by a dominant opposition intent on monopolizing a given activity and capable of restricting it for everyone else, to the point where those deprived are perfectly unable to exercise it. It's 2016, and this simple notion is being abused to call out oppressors in areas where no oppression can take place. Using the most recent revision of the term taught by feminist propaganda, one asserts that another individual intends to prevent them from doing or saying something for whatever reason by ostracizing and incapacitating the former in the range of freedoms within a society. This follows to be based on the perceived oppressor's race, a divisive concept in itself, sex, and sexual orientation. The explanation for a group's exclusively oppressive intent is then followed and supported by pointing out the group's size compared to that of the group that deems itself oppressed. The oppressor will inevitably constitute a major populace in a given environment. In such a mindset, the more generic traits are identified, the easier it becomes to single out the oppressor. It boils down to a paradigm stating that if they outnumber a group, they are in the position of power and therefore the position of oppressors, where they is a word used to describe a group of individuals sharing a set of arbitrarily chosen generic traits. Again, if said group exists in number greater than the one the self-professed victim belongs to or identifies with, the former is deemed the oppressing force while the latter becomes automatically absolved of the sheer possibility to be one. And with this dynamic in mind, it's clear to see who becomes encumbered with responsibility for both leading to and changing the circumstances in which any such victimhood is even remotely possible to outline. This is where privilege is mentioned at least semi-relevantly, as it is undeniable that privilege in and of itself is an obligation laid upon an individual to direct, live for, and contribute to an outcome universally beneficial and advantageous to the entire population. Lately, this very privilege is being under siege by a minority of people who would rather direct its resources to discriminative, exclusive, and generally lesser gains, advertising them as ultimately vital to the betterment of the society as a whole. All this is argued from the perspective of a minority, berating the majority as the one unable to empathize with such perspective, and therefore inherently invalid in their own privilege premise. This is a separate topic altogether, and I will cover it at another time. Getting back on topic, it has already become slightly vague. Namely, who's there to say that oppression is not a thing? After all, everybody gets to see numerous examples of how someone can be prevented from doing something. And moreover, in such a light, every single law on the face of this planet is oppressive by definition whenever it prevents certain acts. To which the reply goes, oppression is not the preemptive measure nor punishment of an act on its own, but a phenomenon where one given group claims the right to do X and stops at nothing to discourage another group from doing the exact same thing, effectively making it virtually impossible for the latter to even consider it. And here's the nail to the coffin. Because in order for oppression to even take place, it must have a political system supporting it. A political system supporting class, race, sex, or whatever based oppression must inevitably come with clear-cut laws referring to specific treatment of specific situations in which a person subject to these laws may find themselves in. On top of that, those laws must make a clear distinction to whom and how they apply. So the kicker goes, no such law exists in the West. So whenever somebody professes their oppression, particularly in this culture, there is nothing at all to confirm their belief, no matter how firm, other than their own perception. Moreover, and you will surely know whom this is about, they are demonstrably capable of congregating, organizing protests and events, manifesting their allegedly oppressed state by making appearances widely discussed on international media, and more. All of this, apparently, without realizing they are exercising their owed due civil rights in order to even pull this. And this, as well as other symptoms discussed to death by now, bears a conclusion. Nobody oppresses them save themselves. If you haven't already, this would be as good time as any to take a look at the blue rectangle I'm displaying for you and to keep its message in mind. Having said all that, why is it then that they insist on vilifying the societal majority, privileged by principle, and expecting, not demanding of them to fix whatever their situation, save them from their peril by stopping the oppression? What? Are we supposed to stop being the majority? Let's all go hand in hand to the cliff's edge and jump into oblivion? No, they actually never come forward with proposals. All they know is their disadvantages inflicted on them for being minorities. This mindset happens to get more backing in feminist academia sources for gender studies and the like. What's the purpose? Control. Sowing distrust in the society and presenting oneself as the only one to believe you, acknowledge your oppression, and enable you doing nothing about it is a perfect bait for people looking for an excuse to stop participating in building the aforementioned society, and to stop taking responsibility for one's own actions, and to shed the necessity to face due consequences thereof, teaching them to expect improvement at the expense of the perceived oppressor, and perpetuating their self-inflicted victimhood by showing appreciation for whatever one has already done for own betterment, implying nothing more could nor should be expected of such a willing listener. Incidentally, this is how cultist sects operate to grow, dishing out cognitive dissonance to unsuspecting victims, then ensure they remain in this victimhood state, all the while pointing at the specific common enemy, just because they are what they are, the one that set it all up to benefit only themselves, writing history to their own praise, ever since the time they are conceived up to the moment they draw their last breath. The cisgendered, heterosexual, white man. Let that sink in, and for the time being, I am done reasoning.